The flight attendant didn't just spill the drink, she drenched him. A splash of red wine streaked across his designer suit as gasps rippled through first class. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she said, but her smirk betrayed no regret. "You should be more careful next time." The young man looked up slowly, wiping his sleeve. Calm, controlled, dangerous in his silence. He wasn't just another passenger. His watch alone could fund her month's salary. "I'm sure you didn't mean it," he said softly. "Of course not," she replied, rolling her eyes. "We don't usually get your kind in first class." The cabin went silent. Then, from the intercom, a voice echoed, "Welcome aboard Skylux Airlines, owned by Mr. Jordan Hayes." Her face drained of color. The man she'd just humiliated was the CEO of the entire airline, and his revenge wouldn't come in anger, it would come in elegance. Welcome to Respect Win Stories, a place where powerful tales come alive and every word carries meaning. No matter where you are watching from New York, Texas, California, or anywhere across the United States, even from the other side of the world, I would love to know where you are joining from today. Share it in the comments below. And while you do, sit back, relax, and let your heart open to a story that will move your soul and spark your imagination. Every story here carries a message, because in the end, respect always wins. Let us begin. Jordan Hayes was used to turbulence not from the air, but from people. At 29, he'd built Skylux Airlines from a scrappy startup into the world's most exclusive carrier. He flew anonymously, often blending in with passengers to see how his staff treated customers. Today, he'd found his answer. The attendant, Clara Reese, wasn't new. She was infamous among crew for her attitude toward anyone she deemed unfit for first class. What she didn't know was that her careless arrogance had just spilled more than wine, it had spilled her future. Because Jordan Hayes never shouted. He documented. He remembered. And then he acted. The scent of Cabernet still lingered in the air long after the splash. Passengers pretended to look away, but curiosity glimmered behind every polite expression. Jordan Hayes sat quietly, a folded napkin soaking the crimson stain on his chest. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't glare. He simply stared at the tray table in front of him, letting silence do what anger could not. Clara Reese, on the other hand, was in motion, fast, flustered, and furious. "Let me get you another drink," she said quickly, but her tone carried the edge of annoyance rather than apology. "House champagne this time. On us." Jordan's eyes flicked up briefly. "No need, just water." "Suit yourself," she muttered, turning on her heel. When she disappeared behind the galley curtain, two passengers leaned closer across the aisle. "Isn't that?" one whispered. "Looks like him," the other said. "But no way he'd be flying commercial." Jordan heard them. He always did. He preferred this anonymity. It showed people's true colors. And right now, Clara's colors were spilling everywhere. From the galley, he heard her voice hushed but sharp. "He's sitting there like he owns the place. These rich wannabes think a watch makes them royalty." Her coworker murmured something inaudible, likely urging her to calm down. But Clara wasn't one to stop mid-climb. "I've been doing this 12 years. I know who belongs in first class and who got lucky with a points upgrade." Her words carried not loud enough for the passengers, but Jordan heard every syllable. The audio recorder on his smartwatch caught them too, automatically logging ambient conversation. He didn't record out of malice. He recorded for accountability, something his father had taught him long before he could afford his first plane ticket. "Respect isn't proven by uniforms," his father used to say. "It's proven when you have power and don't use it." He looked down at the dark stain spreading like a wound across his shirt. The irony wasn't lost on him. A few rows back, a small girl tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, why did she yell at him?" Her mother shushed her gently. "Not everyone knows how to be kind, sweetheart." Jordan smiled faintly. Children always saw what adults ignored. When Clara returned, her voice was sugary again, the mask back in place. "Here you go, sir. Sparkling water, extra napkins. You might want to dab the seat too." He accepted it without a word, but his calmness made her uneasy. "You're awfully quiet," she said with a smirk. "Most people would have demanded a refund by now." He looked up, his expression unreadable. "I don't want a refund, Miss Reese." Her name, spoken softly, precisely. Her smile faltered. "How do you?" He didn't answer. Instead, he turned back to his laptop, typing deliberately, each keystroke rhythmic and steady. The quiet authority in his demeanor unnerved her more than anger ever could. When she walked away, the cabin seemed to tilt around him not from turbulence, but from shifting energy. People sensed it. The first-class passengers who had initially ignored the scene now regarded him differently. There was something in the air, something inevitable. By the time the captain announced their approach to cruising altitude, Clara had convinced herself she'd handled it perfectly. She even joked to another attendant, "He'll forget about it once he lands. They always do." But as she laughed, her phone buzzed in her apron pocket, a message from corporate scheduling. Notification. Reminder. Post. Flight debrief with quality oversight. Flight 721. Attendant Clara Reese. She frowned. "That's weird," she muttered. "Why would oversight want—" Then her eyes flicked toward the quiet man in seat 1 Ampere, typing away in calm silence, his watch glinting under the cabin lights. For the first time that flight, Clara felt turbulence, and they hadn't even hit the clouds yet. The seatbelt sign went off with a soft chime. Cabin lights dimmed to a golden calm, but the tension between row 1 and the galley pulsed beneath the hum of the engines. Clara adjusted her scarf, forcing cheerfulness into her voice as she served the next passenger. "Chicken or pasta, sir?" she asked sweetly. Her eyes slid toward Jordan as if to remind him he was an afterthought. He didn't look up. He was composing an email on his laptop subject line. Service Experience Audit, Flight 721. Every detail poured in with measured precision. Time of incident, staff behavior, tone of apology, passenger reactions. He didn't embellish. He didn't accuse. He simply documented. Across the cabin, Clara whispered to her coworker, Jason. "He's still typing, probably writing a complaint. I swear, people like that live to ruin someone's day." Jason frowned. "Maybe he's just, working?" "Working?" she scoffed. "Please, look at that suit. If he really had money, he wouldn't fly alone. They always travel in packs, assistants, bodyguards, the whole show." Jason's silence said enough. He'd heard rumors before about Clara's attitude, but this was worse. Minutes later, she walked down the aisle again, tray in hand. Her smile returned, sharp as glass. "Would you like your meal warmed, sir?" Jordan's gaze rose from his screen. "No, thank you." "Sure? It's complimentary. You're not worried about the price, right?" Her tone landed like a slap disguised as humor. A few passengers exchanged uneasy glances. One man cleared his throat. "Ma'am, that sounded—" "I was joking," she snapped, cutting him off. "People are so sensitive these days." Jordan exhaled slowly, then closed his laptop. "May I have your full name, please?" Her lips parted, mocking disbelief. "Excuse me?" "You introduced yourself as Clara. What's your surname?" "For my records." He didn't blink, didn't smile. The confidence drained from her face, but pride made her double down. "Reese? Clara Reese." He nodded once, typing it calmly into his notes. Then he reopened a second window, Skylux Crew Evaluation Portal, his own company's internal system, accessible only to senior management. A tiny ping confirmed his login credentials. Jason caught a glimpse of the screen and froze. Executive access. Jordan Hayes. His throat went dry. Jordan looked up and offered Jason a small, polite smile before closing the laptop again. The message was clear. "You know who I am. She soon will too." By now, whispers rippled softly across first class. Passengers felt something shifting, but couldn't name it. The polite, impeccably dressed man in 1 Ampere no longer seemed anonymous. Clara, still ignorant, pressed on. "If you're finished with your—" The intercom crackled. "Miss Reese, please report to the cockpit." Her eyes narrowed. Now? Yes, immediately, came the pilot's voice. She straightened her uniform and stalked off, muttering, probably another pointless request. The galley door closed behind her. Inside the cockpit, Captain Dunbar turned with a measured look. We received a message from ground control, he said. Quality oversight flagged this flight mid-air. Do you know why? Clara's pulse quickened. What? Know who even monitors that live? Dunbar tilted the tablet toward her. The screen displayed a time-stamped report already logged written under the username JH001, Executive Ops. She stared, uncomprehending. Who is that? Jordan Hayes, the captain replied quietly. Our CEO. The words hit harder than turbulence. But he's on board? She stammered. Dunbar nodded once. Seat 1 Ampere. Her stomach plummeted. Every sarcastic comment, every dismissive word replayed in her mind like a nightmare on loop. She gripped the doorframe for balance. Out in the cabin, Jordan sipped his water calmly, eyes fixed on the window where sunlight painted streaks across the clouds. To anyone watching, he looked serene but inside. Every second was a test of restraint. Because for him, justice wasn't about humiliation. It was about lesson. And Clara Reese was about to learn what accountability at 30,000 feet felt like. The cockpit door clicked shut behind Clara, but she barely heard it over the thunder of her pulse. Her mind replayed every second of the flight, the smirk, the whine, the jokes. Each one now a confession. The CEO, seat 1 Ampere. She forced a shaky breath and straightened her uniform. She couldn't afford panic. Not midair. Not in front of the captain. Permission to return to cabin? She asked. Captain Dunbar gave a slow nod. Keep it professional, Miss Reese. The man's been calm the entire flight. Don't give him reason not to be. She turned, gripping the door handle until her knuckles whitened. Professional, the word echoed, like turbulence inside her head. She'd built her whole career on that image, the perfect attendant. And now it was unraveling in one flight. When she stepped back into first class, the energy had changed. The air itself seemed heavier. Passengers whispered in low voices. Eyes flicked between her and Jordan like invisible cameras. Jordan still sat there, serene, scrolling through something on his laptop. The hum of the engines underscored the tension. Clara swallowed hard and approached. Sir? Mr. Hayes. His eyes lifted steady, unreadable. Yes? I wanted to apologize again for the spill and the misunderstanding. The spill? He repeated softly, as if testing the word. That's what you're calling it? I didn't know. He closed the laptop gently. You didn't need to know who I was to treat me with respect. The line landed with the precision of a captain's command. It wasn't loud, but the rows around them heard it. One passenger nodded subtly. Another whispered, Exactly. Clara's throat tightened. You're right. I was wrong. Jordan studied her face, searching for sincerity. Then he said, Sit for a moment. She blinked. Sir? Sit. No one had ever told her that before, certainly not a passenger. She hesitated, then slid into the empty seat across the aisle. The leather creaked under the weight of humiliation. Jordan leaned slightly forward, voice low but firm. Do you know why I fly unannounced? She shook her head. Because arrogance doesn't hide when it thinks no one important is watching. I don't run this airline from a tower, I run it from truth. What I see, I fix. Clara bit her lip. Then I'll be fired. Maybe, he said. Or maybe you'll learn. Depends which version of Clara walks off this plane. The PA crackled. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin our descent into New York in 15 minutes. Jordan stood, smoothing his jacket where the wine stain had dried into a dull maroon patch. Clean the cabin, Miss Reese. Make sure the passengers land comfortable. We'll talk on the ground. Yes, sir, she whispered. He turned and walked toward the galley, leaving her seated in silence. When she finally stood, she noticed something on her service cart, a folded napkin. On it, written in neat, steady handwriting. Respect costs nothing, but pays for everything. Her breath caught. The phrase was both reprimand and mercy. She slipped it into her pocket as the landing gear deployed. The aircraft shuddered softly as it descended through thick clouds, the city's lights glimmering below like scattered embers. Clara moved through the aisle, checking belts and trays, her voice subdued but gentle now. For the first time all flight, passengers looked at her not with annoyance, but empathy. They'd seen her stumble. They might soon see her fall. When the tires kissed the runway, a ripple of applause filled the cabin. Jordan didn't clap. He simply nodded once to the crew. As the plane taxied to the gate, Clara stood by the exit, hands clasped. Jordan passed her without a glance, the faintest scent of cedar cologne trailing after him. But as he stepped onto the jet bridge, he paused. Without turning back, he said quietly, "You'll hear from corporate." Her stomach dropped. Then he added softer, "Make sure they hear a better version of you next time." And with that, he walked away, leaving her in the doorway, heart pounding, the napkin's words burning in her hand. By the time the wheels touched the gate, Clara's pulse had steadied into a fragile rhythm of denial. Maybe he'd let it go. Maybe that quiet remark had only sounded final. She told herself these things while passengers disembarked, one polite smile at a time. But her hands wouldn't stop trembling. Then she saw them, two security officers in navy jackets waiting just beyond the jet bridge. Not hostile, just official. Her heart climbed into her throat. "Miss Reese?" one asked. "Yes?" "Please accompany us to conference room 3 for a post-flight debrief." Her knees weakened. "Now?" "Yes, ma'am." Corporate's request. Inside the terminal, sunlight streamed across glass walls and polished floors that reflected her every nervous step. When the doors slid open, the hum of voices hit her like pressure change in a cabin. A dozen staff members sat around a long table. At its head, laptop open, was Jordan Hayes, no stain on his shirt now, only cold composure. He looked up. "Good afternoon, Miss Reese. Please sit." She did. The chair felt harder than metal. Jordan tapped his screen and a projection appeared on the wall. Cabin footage from Flight 721. The sound of clinking glasses, a splash, and then her own voice filled the room. "You should be more careful next time. We don't usually get your kind in first class." The words echoed like gunfire in the silence that followed. Clara flinched at her own tone. She wanted to vanish into the carpet. Jordan didn't look at her while the video played. He addressed the room instead. "This is why we do anonymous evaluations. Arrogance at altitude becomes humiliation on the ground for everyone involved." A manager shifted uncomfortably. "Sir? She's been with us for 12 years, an isolated incident, perhaps?" Jordan's eyes flicked to him. "You call it isolated because cameras rarely catch the rest." Clara found her voice thin and cracking. "Mr. Hayes, please, I was careless, not cruel. I didn't mean—" "You didn't think," he corrected, finally meeting her eyes. "Intent doesn't erase impact." He pressed another key. The screen changed to show passenger commendations, emails, and real-time tweets already spreading online. Someone had recognized him mid-flight and posted a blurred photo. "CEO Jordan Hayes stays calm after rude flight attendant spills wine. Definition of class." The post had over 50,000 likes. Her stomach flipped. The story was already out there, her mistake immortalized. Jordan folded his hands. "Miss Reese, this meeting isn't about revenge. It's about culture. People will see how we handle this. Do we fire and forget, or do we fix and prevent?" He turned the question to the table. "Suggestions?" Murmurs rose. "Training overhaul. Anonymous feedback forms. Cross-cultural workshops." He nodded slowly, then looked back at Clara. "You'll attend every session. You'll help redesign them. And you'll record a message to our staff explaining why respect matters more than rank." Tears blurred her vision. "You're keeping me employed?" "For now," he said, "because growth is rarer than punishment." The words cut and healed in the same breath. Around the table, heads nodded in quiet approval. Jordan closed his laptop. Dismissed. People began filing out, whispering. Clara stayed seated, motionless, until the room emptied. Jordan stood, straightening his cufflinks. You thought I wanted to embarrass you. I wanted you to see yourself. She managed a feint. I do. He paused at the doorway. Good. Don't forget what that looks like. As he walked away, she caught her reflection in the blank screen, pale, humbled, human. For the first time in years, she didn't see the flawless attendant. She saw someone who had finally hit ground and could choose to climb again. The video leaked before lunchtime. By 11:47 a.m., Skylux Airlines was trending worldwide. Every news outlet wanted a quote from the young black CEO who stayed calm under fire. Stock tickers scrolled with the airline's name. Hashtags lit up feeds. Number Grace Altitude. Number Jordan Hayes. Number Wine Incident. Inside headquarters, the communications team huddled like air traffic controllers during a storm. Do we issue a statement? One asked. Jordan shook his head. We show, not tell. He had scheduled a live employee broadcast that afternoon. Clara sat in a side room, eyes swollen from hours of replaying the footage. HR had offered to let her skip the session. She refused. If the world was going to see the consequences, she'd face them herself. When Jordan stepped on stage, the auditorium quieted. Cameras focused, lights flared. He spoke without notes. Yesterday, one of our employees made a mistake. I made a choice to respond, not react. Respect isn't a slogan on a fuselage. It's the air we breathe together. When one of us forgets that, we all lose altitude. He paused, letting the line settle. That's why Skylux will launch Project Altitude, a program led by the very team that needs it most. He gestured toward the side door. Miss Clara Reese. The audience stirred. Clara stepped out, trembling but composed in a plain Navy uniform. No makeup, no glamour, just honesty. A soft gasp rippled through the crowd. She stood beside Jordan, clutching the microphone. Yesterday, I embarrassed myself, my company, and my passengers. I thought I understood professionalism. I didn't understand humility. Mr. Hayes could have fired me. Instead, he's letting me help change the way we treat people. Please learn from me before you become me. Her voice cracked, but the sincerity carried farther than any press release. When she finished, the silence broke into steady applause. Not thunderous, not indulgent, but human. Later, in his office, overlooking the runway, Jordan watched the replay. The comments poured in beneath the live stream. Leadership done right. She owned it, he taught without cruelty. Maybe corporate America finally gets it. Miles away, passengers from Flight 721 were posting their own stories. How calmly he'd handled the incident, how kind he'd been afterward. The narrative had flipped from scandal to standard. Clara knocked softly on the glass door. May I come in? He nodded. I wanted to thank you, she said. Not for keeping my job, for giving me one more chance to earn it. Jordan leaned back in his chair. You did the hard part yourself. You faced the camera. She hesitated. People online are brutal. I can't undo what I said. You don't need to erase it, he replied. You need to outgrow it. Outside, a jet roared past the window, lifting into the sunlight. He watched it climb. The world forgives slower than gravity, Miss Reese. But if you keep climbing, even gravity runs out of air. She smiled faintly, the first genuine one he'd ever seen from her. Then I'd better keep climbing. As she left, the PR director entered. Sir, CNN wants a statement about the viral clip. Jordan closed his laptop. Tell them they already saw it. He looked once more at the sky, the streak of silver slicing through clouds. The brand had survived the turbulence, but more importantly, the culture had shifted. For him, the lesson wasn't about winning headlines. It was about proving that dignity could trend too. 3 days later, the Skylux headquarters buzzed like a control tower during rush hour. The wine incident, as the media called it, had evolved into a case study in leadership. Business schools requested rights to use the footage. Aviation magazines called it the most elegant crisis management of the decade. But Jordan wasn't celebrating. He was planning. In a hangar converted into a training auditorium, nearly 600 employees gathered for the first Project Altitude workshop. The large screen behind the podium glowed with the company logo fading into a horizon of clouds. Clara stood backstage, palms slick, uniform pressed perfectly. This was her first public appearance since the broadcast. The HR director whispered, "Ready?" "As I'll ever be." Jordan walked out first. No suit this time, just a simple white shirt, sleeves rolled, a flight badge clipped to his belt. The crowd applauded lightly. He raised a hand for quiet. "Titles don't make leaders," he began. "Behavior does. I built this airline because I believe dignity should fly first class no matter the ticket price." He paused, then turned toward the side curtain. And sometimes, lessons come from turbulence. Clara stepped onto the stage to a hush. Instead of shrinking, she met the gaze of the employees filling the rows. "You already know who I am," she said, "so let me tell you who I want to be." A ripple of surprise moved through the audience as she began recounting her own career, how small slights had hardened into habits, how cynicism had replaced empathy. "I confused authority with worth," she admitted, "until one spilled drink made me see the difference." Jordan stood slightly behind her, silent support made visible. When she finished, he returned to the microphone. "Every aircraft carries a black box that records truth. From now on, so will we. Our culture's black box will be transparency, every complaint, every compliment, logged and answered." He clicked a remote, revealing the new employee portal. Altitude Zero opened feedback from passengers and staff alike, reviewed directly by his office. Murmurs of approval swept through the hall. Then he dropped the final reveal. "And one more thing. As of today, Miss Reese is promoted to training supervisor for passenger experience. Her first task, teach every new attendant what humility at 30,000 feet looks like." Gasps, then applause. Clara's eyes widened in disbelief. She turned toward him, whispering, "You can't be serious." "Completely," he said. "You already taught the world what happens when we forget respect. Now teach them how to remember it." The ovation built slowly, sincere and sustained. Several attendants stood. Others wiped tears. The applause wasn't for perfection, it was for growth. Later, as the hall emptied, Jordan and Clara walked side by side down the quiet corridor that smelled faintly of jet fuel and coffee. "I don't deserve this," she murmured. He smiled. "Neither did I deserve what you did. But grace means giving what's undeserved." They stopped near a wide window overlooking the runway. A Skylux jet rolled toward takeoff, engines glowing orange in the dusk. He nodded toward it. "You see that? Every flight carries the story of someone trying again." She followed his gaze. "Then I'll make sure they take off right." He extended his hand. "Welcome back to the sky, Miss Reese." She shook it firmly, the shame of the past week melting into resolve. "Thank you for not grounding me forever." Jordan's voice softened. "People aren't planes. They're meant to rise after repair." As the jet lifted, the reflection of light streaked across both of them, two figures standing in the window glow, proof that justice and mercy could share the same horizon. The storm of attention didn't fade, it evolved. A week after the hangar event, Skylux's inbox overflowed with messages from passengers and airline staff around the world. Some wrote to praise the CEO's patience, others to confess the small cruelties they'd committed in their own uniforms. Jordan read every letter. Late at night, lights spilling from his office window over the tarmac, he scrolled through stories of change. An attendant who apologized to a passenger with an accent, a gate agent who helped an elderly man board without rolling her eyes, a pilot who reminded his crew, every seat matters. He saved them in a folder labeled Altitude Restored. Meanwhile, Clara stepped back into training halls that once echoed with her authority. Now, those walls heard honesty instead of ego. She began each class the same way. If you ever think a passenger's beneath you, imagine that they own the plane. Because, one way or another, they do. The recruits listened differently to her than they did to any manual. They could see the humility that no uniform could fake. During one session, a young trainee asked, "Miss Reese, were you scared when you found out it was him?" She smiled, a little wistfully. "I was terrified. But fear isn't punishment, it's awareness. And awareness saves lives up here." Word spread quickly that training had changed, attendance jumped, HR surveys spiked with phrases like, "Finally human again." The company that once prided itself on luxury had begun to earn something rarer: empathy. Across media networks, pundits debated the Jordan Hayes method, calm correction, instead of public firing. Some called it genius, others too gentle. Jordan ignored the noise. He cared only for the quiet proof he saw in the eyes of his crew when he walked through terminals. Respect had become reflex. Still, he knew image couldn't replace intention, so he ordered an internal audit, anonymous interviews with every staff member, including Clara. When the reports came back, the results stunned him. Morale up 37%. Customer complaints down 62%. Turnover cut in half. He printed one comment in bold and pinned it to the wall of his office. "Leadership isn't how loud you talk. It's how you make silence feel safe." That night, as another jet lifted into the dark, Jordan stood by the window, tie loosened, watching the trail of lights arc across the sky. Clara joined him with a mug of coffee. "Do you ever get tired of fixing things?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Fixing things keeps them flying. People too." She nodded. "I used to think turbulence meant danger. Now I think it just means change." Exactly. Outside, lightning flickered far off over the Atlantic, a thin silver vein in the clouds. He didn't flinch, neither did she. When the lights faded, the runway glowed again, steady, bright, ready for the next takeoff. And for the first time since that spilled drink, Clara felt completely at ease in the air she once polluted with arrogance. She whispered, almost to herself, "I'm grateful for the mess that showed me who I was." Jordan glanced at her. "That's the only kind of spill worth remembering." They both laughed softly, the sound of closure, not comedy. The engines outside roared, rolling toward dawn. For Skylux, the crisis was over. For Jordan and Clara, it was just the beginning of a higher standard. 2 months after Project Altitude launched, Skylux looked and felt different. The headlines had long since faded, but their echo lingered in unexpected ways. In business magazines, the airline's name appeared beside words like transparency, compassion, and turnaround miracle. Bookings had increased by 12%, not because of new routes or cheaper tickets, but because people trusted the logo again. Passengers said it felt like flying with conscience. At the quarterly investors meeting, one shareholder asked bluntly, "Jordan, was forgiving an employee worth the risk?" Jordan smiled. "Forgiveness isn't the opposite of accountability. It's how you make accountability sustainable. Fear fixes nothing. It only hides the next mistake." There was no applause, only quiet nods. The numbers on the screen behind him, profits climbing, customer satisfaction rising, did the talking. After the meeting, he found Clara waiting near the exit. She wore a trainer's badge now, not a flight attendant's pin. "You still don't like speeches, do you?" she said. "I prefer results," he replied. "Well," she grinned, "the new recruits are quoting you already. Someone actually used Altitude of Empathy in a role-play scenario." He groaned. "Please don't turn me into a slogan." Too late. They walked together through the glass atrium toward the training wing, where laughter spilled from open doors. Inside, attendants were practicing emergency drills, but Clara noticed how they spoke to one another. Calm, respectful, joking without cruelty. A small miracle. She moved from group to group, correcting posture, praising teamwork. Jordan watched quietly from the doorway. The woman who once measured worth by seat numbers now measured it by sincerity. Later that week, Skylux received an invitation from the International Aviation Ethics Council to present at their annual summit. Clara nearly refused public speaking, still terrified her, but Jordan insisted. "You're the story. he said. I'm just the witness. At the summit, held in Geneva, she stood beneath chandeliers and faced hundreds of airline executives. Cameras flashed. She told them about a single spilled glass of wine that rewrote an entire company's culture. No self-pity, no excuses, only lessons. We talk about flight safety, she concluded, but emotional safety is where it begins. People perform best when they're treated as people, not positions. When she finished, the applause came slowly, building like takeoff. Journalists scribbled. A competitor's CEO shook her hand afterward and said, I've fired people for less. Maybe that's why I keep dealing with the same problems. The quote would appear in an editorial titled The Altitude Principle, Leading Without Cruelty. Back in New York, Jordan watched the recording late one night in his office. Outside, rain streaked the windows, turning runway lights into streaks of color. He couldn't help smiling. Clara's voice carried confidence now, not arrogance, not fear, but quiet authority. When she returned, he met her at the terminal with a coffee. You were flawless, he said. I was terrified. Good. It means you cared. They sat in the observation lounge, watching a Skylux plane push back from the gate. Around them, passengers chatted softly, unaware of the history written into this brand. Clara broke the silence. Do you ever think about that first flight? Every time I board, he said. It reminds me how thin the air is between pride and grace. She looked down at her reflection in the polished floor. And if I fall again? Then you'll do what pilots do, he said. Correct the course and keep flying. The engines outside thundered as the aircraft accelerated, lifting into the clouds. The reflection of its lights shimmered across their faces. Two people changed by altitude. Proof that leadership could be kind without being weak. The flight climbed higher, leaving behind the city that once watched them stumble. 6 months later, the winter sun hung low over Manhattan, throwing long gold streaks across the Skylux headquarters. The crisis that had once threatened to stain the brand had become its defining legend. Inside the lobby, an entire wall now displayed photos of employees caught performing acts of kindness, helping elderly passengers, comforting anxious flyers, guiding families through delays. Above them, a plaque read, Altitude is not height, it's humanity. Jordan walked past it every morning without slowing. He didn't need a reminder of the change. He saw it in the faces that greeted him, smiles that came from respect, not fear. That evening, the company hosted its annual Gala of Excellence. The ballroom shimmered with silver and navy. The colors of the fleet and soft jazz floated above the murmur of conversation. Reporters lingered near the entrance, waiting for the CEO who had redefined corporate grace. When Jordan arrived, he wore no tuxedo, just a simple tailored suit and his pilot's pin. The crowd turned, applause beginning in waves. He nodded politely, moving through the room until he reached the stage. Tonight, he said into the microphone, we're not celebrating profits. We're celebrating altitude, how far we've climbed inside. He gestured toward the back of the room, and there's one person who taught us that lesson more than anyone. Clara froze. Dozens of eyes turned toward her. She tried to sink lower in her chair, but colleagues around her urged her forward. Slowly, she walked to the stage, heart hammering. Jordan smiled. Clara Reese reminded us that humility isn't the absence of mistakes. It's the courage to face them. For her honesty, resilience, and leadership, Skylux names her Employee of the Year. The applause hit like thunder. Flashbulbs flared. Clara blinked against tears as he handed her a glass plaque engraved with wings and the words Grace Restored. She leaned toward the microphone. I don't deserve this, she said softly. But maybe that's the point. None of us do. Until we start acting like we do. Laughter and applause mingled. Somewhere in the crowd, Jason, the attendant who had once tried to calm her mid-flight, wiped his eyes. After the ceremony, Jordan slipped away to the terrace overlooking the city. The skyline glittered like circuitry beneath the cold night sky. He'd expected relief. Instead, He felt a quiet gratitude that settled deeper than pride. Clara joined him, shawl pulled tight against the wind. "You were right," she said. "Forgiveness is heavier than anger." He chuckled, "Only at first. Then it starts to lift." They stood in silence, watching a Skylux jet rise beyond the skyscrapers, its lights blinking like a pulse in the dark. "Do you ever think it'll happen again?" she asked. "Someone will spill something," he said. "Someone will judge someone else. We'll just keep cleaning it up better each time." She nodded. "That's all leadership is, isn't it? Cleaning the spill without making another." He smiled at that, a real smile, unguarded. "You should put that on the next training manual." From the ballroom below, music swelled. Laughter drifted up through the glass doors. The gala would go late into the night, but neither of them needed the noise. The quiet was enough, the kind of quiet that follows a safe landing. When they finally went back inside, people rose to greet them, not with curiosity, but with affection. The scandal that once defined them had become folklore, a story told to new hires about the day humility took flight. Jordan raised a glass in a modest toast. "To the crew," he said. "To second chances." Clara lifted hers. "And to the spills that teach us how to fly." The crowd cheered, and somewhere outside, another Skylux aircraft lifted into the night, steady, luminous, carrying their story into the sky it had changed forever. Long after the gala lights dimmed, Jordan sat alone in his office. Outside, the city had gone silver with midnight frost. The only sound was the ticking of the small brass clock that had once sat on his father's desk. It had flown with him through every startup failure and every first-class triumph. He turned it in his hands now, thinking of the old man's voice, steady, patient, the same tone Jordan had used with Clara on that first flight. "Power isn't what you hold, son. It's what you choose to release." The words had felt abstract when he was 20. Now, at 29, they were gravity itself. A soft knock pulled him from the thought. Clara stepped inside, still in her evening dress, the glass plaque tucked under her arm. "You're still here," she said. "So are you," he answered. "Couldn't sleep?" She shook her head. "I kept replaying everything from the spill to tonight. It feels like it happened to someone else." "Maybe it did," he said. "Maybe you outgrew the version of you that started it." She smiled faintly and sat across from him. For a while, they said nothing, just watched the reflection of runway lights moving across the window. Finally, she asked, "Do you ever regret not firing me?" Jordan leaned back, eyes thoughtful. "Sometimes I wonder if I was too lenient. Then I look at what came after new training, happier crews, passengers writing thank you letters, and I realize firing you would have ended the story halfway through." "That's the kindest thing anyone's ever said to me," she whispered. "It's also the truest," he said. "You finished the landing." They both laughed quietly. On the tarmac, a maintenance crew rolled a jet into position, its navigation lights blinking red and white. The faint thrum of its engines filled the pause between them. Clara traced the rim of her coffee cup. "My father used to tell me that working in the sky makes you forget the ground. I think he was right. I stopped seeing people as people." Jordan nodded. "We all do when we fly too high." "I'm scared of going back up," she admitted. "Then stay scared," he said gently. "It means you'll stay human." She looked up, eyes glistening. "Do you really believe people can change?" He pointed toward the plaque resting against her arm. "You're proof." A long silence settled, comfortable, earned. Eventually, she stood. "I should go. Early class tomorrow." He rose too. "Clara," he said as she reached the door, "when you teach them, remind them of this. Turbulence doesn't mean you're falling. It just means you're flying through weather you can handle." She smiled. "I will." When she left, Jordan returned to the window. Snow had begun to fall over the runway lights, soft and slow, the world's quiet applause. He placed the brass clock back on his desk, wound it once, and whispered to the memory of his father, "You were right. Letting go was the real altitude." Outside, another plane lifted through the snow, tail light blinking into the darkness. Jordan watched it climb until it became a single moving star. The night held no turbulence now, only peace. Morning sunlight spilled across the training hall, warming the silver letters on the wall. Altitude is humanity. Rows of new attendants sat straight backed at their desks, notebooks open, watching Clara pace the front of the room. Her uniform was the same cut she had worn for years, but she carried it differently now. Shoulders relaxed, eyes kind. The name badge that once felt like armor had become a reminder of work done, not status claimed. Okay, she said, smiling at the class. Scenario 1. A passenger is nervous about flying. What's the first thing you do? A young woman raised her hand. Tell them the plane is safe? Clara shook her head gently. You tell them they are safe. Machines don't need comfort, people do. The trainees scribbled notes. She could see herself in them, the same eagerness, the same fragile pride, and she wanted to spare them the hard landing she'd taken. Every lesson she taught now carried a story, even if she never said the name Jordan Hayes. They all knew it anyway. The tale had become company lore. After class, she lingered by the window overlooking the runway. A little boy pressed his palms to the glass beside her, eyes wide at the sight of a departing jet. His mother smiled apologetically. Sorry, he's obsessed with planes. Clara knelt to the boy's level. You know what's the best thing about flying? He shook his head. You get to look down and realize the world's still beautiful, even when you're above it. The boy grinned. I want to be a pilot. Then remember that, she said. Keep your heart at ground level. When they left, she stayed there a long time, watching the jet lift into the sunlight. The engines roared, but the sound felt gentle now, like forgiveness with wings. That evening, she returned to her small apartment downtown. It looked different lately. Fresh flowers on the table, photographs framed instead of stacked, light spilling across clean counters. She had started painting again abstract swirls of color that reminded her of sunrise through cabin windows. Her phone buzzed. A message from Jordan. Board meeting moved to Thursday. Also, congratulations. Training ratings highest in company history. She smiled, typing back. Altitude achieved. Then, after a pause, thank you for the second chance. His reply came a minute later. You gave it to yourself. I just cleared the runway. She set the phone down, tears surprising her. Not sadness release. The next morning, walking to work through crisp winter air, she noticed people greeting her with warmth instead of wary politeness. Morning, Miss Reese, a security guard called. Heard your class was full again. It's the coffee, she joked. But inside, she knew it wasn't. It was trust the kind you can't pour or fake. Later that day, a memo arrived from corporate announcing the Clara Reese Scholarship for underrepresented women entering aviation service. She read it twice, unable to breathe. Her past mistake had become someone else's opportunity. That was redemption, in its purest form. That night, standing on her balcony, she watched a Skylux plane pass overhead. Its belly lights winked like stars, and for a moment she imagined all the people inside nervous, tired, hopeful, never knowing the story written in the skies above them. She whispered, Fly safe. Below, the city glittered. Above, the aircraft climbed until it vanished into blue. Spring arrived with the kind of mornings pilots love: clear sky, thin air, sunlight sharp enough to turn aluminum wings into mirrors. On one of those mornings, Jordan stood at the edge of Hangar 12, watching a maintenance crew finish repainting the company motto onto the side of a jet. Altitude is humanity. The letters gleamed fresh and certain. He heard footsteps and turned. Clara approached in civilian clothes, hair pulled back, a travel bag slung across her shoulder. Leaving again? He asked. First vacation in 3 years, she said with a grin. Greece, warm beaches, no turbulence. After everything, you've earned it. She looked at the plane, at the motto. We both did. They walked along the hangar's edge, where the smell of fuel mixed with the salt from the nearby bay. Mechanics waved. Someone shouted, Morning, Captain Hayes! He waved back. For once, the word captain didn't feel like a title. It felt like belonging. I read about the scholarship, he said. Beautiful idea. It was yours, she replied. He shook his head. No, I just funded it. You gave it meaning. They reached the observation deck overlooking the runway. Planes lined up like silver, arrows ready to lift. The rumble of an engine filled the air, deep and steady. Remember that day? She asked quietly. The wine? He said, smiling. Hard to forget. It doesn't sting anymore. It just reminds me how fast pride can spill. That's how lessons work, he said. They stop hurting when they've done their job. Below them, a training aircraft began its takeoff roll. Clara's eyes followed it until it lifted. Every time I see one go up, she said, I think of all the people inside trusting someone they can't even see. Jordan nodded. That's leadership. Keeping them calm, even when you're shaking. They stood side by side, wind tugging at their clothes, until the plane disappeared into a sheet of blue. Clara turned to him. You ever think about what your father would say now? Jordan's gaze softened. He'd probably tell me to stop standing around and get back to work. Then, after a beat, but I think he'd be proud that we didn't waste the fall. She smiled. You didn't. You turned it into flight. He looked at her. At the person who had once been a headline and was now a legacy. So did you. A voice crackled over the PA. Test flight ready for clearance, Captain Hayes. He exhaled. That's me. Clara offered her hand. Safe flight, sir. He shook it. Safe journey, Miss Reese. As she walked away, sunlight caught the metal clasp of her bag, flashing briefly like a wingtip in motion. Jordan watched until she vanished around the corner, then turned toward the jet waiting on the runway. Minutes later, engines roared. The aircraft surged forward, wheels leaving Earth. From her taxi window miles away, Clara looked up and saw it small against the endless sky, climbing through clouds like a promise kept. She whispered, Keep rising. Back in the cockpit, Jordan eased the throttle, feeling the familiar lift in his chest as altitude numbers climbed. Below him stretched a world newly kind, newly aware. In the radio hum, he thought he heard his father's voice again. Son, the sky belongs to those who remember the ground. He smiled and leveled the wings. Outside, the horizon burned gold, and somewhere between the clouds and the city, between forgiveness and flight, two lives that had once collided in a single careless moment, now moved forward balanced, steady, free.